from the farming community, because I think he's been badgering everybody in house in the past few weeks. So I'll hand you over to Peter Goodwin.
First, I'd like to thank you all for coming. It means a lot, as I'm standing in this area, so it's good to see faces. Now, there's a couple of reasons I'm standing. One, because I'm a dairy farmer and we can't go on the way we are. The other is because, personally, I don't like all these new houses. Now, to stop the new houses, we need to support the farmer. Because when a farmer's not making money, he sells up, next thing you know, ready-mix concrete are making a fortune. So it's all been concreted over. Now, there's a few things which I've noticed that is going to help this. One is by buying British produce. Now, a lot of people that I'm speaking to are getting confused because a lot of people think if they buy produce with the little red tractor on, it means it's British. Well, it's not. That little red tractor means somebody has stood there and said, that looks a nice bit of produce, a nice piece of meat, we'll put a stamp on that. We'll let it into Britain. It then gets packaged in Britain and it forms a little red tractor. I had a lady come up to me the other day. She says, well, I was buying British, it had a red tractor on it. So then I went to the supermarket and there was a note on the till. So I took it back because it had been recalled. Turned out to be horse meat. Somebody cannot tell the difference between a horse and a cow here. And they put the little red tractor on it and it's getting people confused. Now, the other thing is milk. The milk price is being driven down and down. And what this is as a country, Britain is the biggest consumer of dairy products. We make the most, we drink and eat the most. The rest of Europe make it, but they don't use it. So what's happening is, it's all flooding into this country. And it's driving the price down. And as it's hammering these farmers down, these farmers have got no option and no choice but to sell up at this point. Which is then forming houses, and we all love the countryside. So, if we can, as an area, because every area is the same, buy the right produce and support the local area, I'm sure we can come out of this the right way. And for the dairy farmers that are in here, they're getting very worried. Because they think, UKIP, we don't give the subsidies, we don't do all this. Well, we do. The only thing is we don't want to share them with Europe. We want it to go into our area. And that's where we want it to stay. The other thing, which is not helping, with the planning side of it, is with Cheshire being the local area, we're in a mess. Because they haven't got the plan and everything else that they need. So all these things are getting passed all the time. And because they're getting passed, everybody seems to want to take shortcuts. And these shortcuts are leading this country downhill. With the imports, with the council we've got, with just simple little things like eggs. Eggs that are coming into this country, there's a firm not so far away from here. They have eggs. On the shelf, they're classed as free range, fresh eggs. Now, I don't really class an egg 2 weeks old fresh. They come with the eggs that are broken. They're chucked in a bin. You think that they'd be chucked away. They're not. There's what they call recycled, so they make cakes with local bakeries. And this is all going, and people don't realise what is going on the shelves. Was it a protest in Market Drayton at Muller? Polish milk lorries coming in, not refrigerated, travelled to get here, swishing about. That's just like a big massive mixer. And what's happening there, when the plug's pulled on it, it's like clotted cheese, big white lumps and water. But this is being sold to you as the public in Muller yogurts. It's being sold to you in milkshakes. Now Muller's German owned. I don't really know why we've fought all these wars with the Germans, because they're taking over. They've later since bought Dairy Crest. How much is going to be imported with these companies? How much? Muller Dairies, it'll be 3 weeks ago, we're importing over 1 million litres of milk a day. This is all going in us. It's travelling unrefrigerated lorries. They have different standards to meet than us, because our milk price is paid on what we call a back to scan, how clean your milk is. We get inspectors coming round. Your gloves have got to be spotless. Your parlour's got to be spotless. This isn't happening in Europe. Their milk comes as it comes. And nobody, they don't advertise this, but us as the public are using it. They're also, when Muller also buying all these other dairies, it's spreading more and more, all the time. And it's not fair, the fact that one dairy gives one price and one gives another. Some farmers are funding the government, while other farmers are just coming bankrupt. And what my point is here really, we can support the local farmer, we can support the local area and keep the green fields that we have got, which we all enjoy, keep those cows in those fields that we all enjoy seeing. I'm sure it'd be a better place.
Yeah.
And that's all really I've got to say.
Here's another point. The Germans owned our blessed trains. Deutsche Bahn. Yes, it's owned by Deutsche Bahn.
We're going to have questions at the end, if that's all right. So Stephen's going to speak shortly, and if there's any questions, if you can leave that to the very end for both speakers tonight. So it's a great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Stephen Woolfe, MEP. It's got a good ring to it now, hasn't it, Stephen?
It's better when it's no longer MEP and we're out of Europe.
Very true. Yeah. I was with Stephen the night that he actually got the third position for us in Manchester. It was quite, I think Ferguson called it squeaky bum time, wasn't it, Stephen? Literally at the death, we managed to get our third MEP. Paul and Louise had already been officially selected at that point. So anyway, Stephen is now our immigration and economic spokesman, I think. So both roles. So I'll hand you over to Stephen Woolfe, MEP.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I hope you're sitting comfortably. Thank you, Richard, and thank you for this branch, which has been incredibly kind to me during the last couple of years. Particularly, I recognise all the hard work that you put into, and as Richard said, gave us a very close third place when we squeezed out the Labour Party from getting their fourth seat and extending the private fiefdom that they seem to think is theirs across vast swathes of the northwest of England. And yes, Richard, it does have a ring MEP after my name, but I'd much rather, as I said, be in a position that after a referendum given to our country, that was stripped of me and I was made unemployed again, and I could go back to being a lawyer once more because we're outside of the European Union and we wouldn't actually need to have any MEPs from Britain in the European Union because we've left it, we're free and we've got our sovereignty back. And I want to say thanks to Pete, because it takes a brave move for an individual who works in an ordinary job, doing a great job for something that we need by being a farmer, and not being like all the other politicians that we see from the Labour Party and the Conservatives and the Liberals, who are professional politicians, who go to the right universities, who all study, as we know, PPE, who then go off and become trainee politicians in Parliament, where they become assistants to other MPs, or MEPs as I see vast swathes of them in Europe, where they then train to become a young MP at 27 and have never got a single job between them, that they do not understand the lives that we have to do, understand what it means to put petrol in your car or queue up for a bus, understand what it means to have to pay your electricity bill, understand what it means to do 40, 50 or 60 hours just to pay for your family, as this young man is. And I'm really grateful that, like so many people in UKIP, an ordinary person with an ordinary job is standing up for this country and his community. Well done. As a farmer, I actually thought he was going to take one of my favourite jokes, which I was asked to do. I've been told I wouldn't do this again. And it relates to a farmer sees in the distance, so it could have been UKIP, it could have been in the distance there is a fast car coming across in the distance, smoke behind it, brushing up all that soil, and it screeches in front of the farmer, and out comes this rather smart guy. Sunglasses, pulled back hair, brilliant tan. You could see the £10,000 watch on his arm. And he approaches the farmer and he says, "Excuse me, if I can tell you how many cattle you've got in that field, can I have one of them for free?" And the farmer turns around to him and says, "Okay, you can do that." So the man whips out his latest mobile phone, taps in some details in there, connects it to his laptop, the coordinates are sent up across the satellites into Frankfurt. Frankfurt kind of prints out a map, does some digital detailing, sends it back to his phone. He gets a portable printer, prints out a lovely piece of paper, and the paper says, "You have 1,731 cows there." And the farmer says, "Well, that's right, I have that number of animals. You can have one then." So the man starts to pick up this animal. He's trying to shove it into the smallness of his sports car. When the farmer turns to him and he says, "Excuse me, if I tell you what your job is, can I have my animal back, please?" And he said, "Yeah, of course. You'll never guess what I do." He said, "I think you're a European Commissioner." And the man is stunned. He stood back and he said, "Damn right, how did you guess?" He said, "Well, actually, you came out of the blue without me asking. You sped up and asked me questions to answers I already knew. No one called you. You have no understanding of who I am. You have no understanding of my job. You have an understanding of farming, and you have no understanding of animals, because can I have my sheep back, please?" And like so many of us, that's how we feel about the European Union. It is distant. It's out there away from us. But it actually plays a really key and important role. This morning, I was in the Parliament there, and I sat on my own after everyone, all the other MEPs, apart from our own UKIP MEPs and the groups that are also opposed to Europe, of which now the Parliament has 1/3. From Finland to Germany, from Greece to France, from Italy to Spain, there are parties in there that no longer want their countries to be part of the European Union. And whilst we're in the chamber, which is surrounded and watched by hundreds of people looking down on this, as soon as the last votes, and the votes means where you get paid. If you don't vote, you don't get paid. The rest of the socialists, the Greens, the GUIs, and the Conservative parties across Europe run off. Whilst the debate was all about an accession treaty to allow another country to join the European Union, this time Moldova. Moldova, a population of 3.5 million. Moldova with one of the highest rates of corruption recognised by the United Nations. Moldova with some of the lowest wages and poverty in the whole of Europe and actually across the Western world. But Moldova, that was being given two things in that vote today, which they all voted for. Firstly, an accession agreement where we, you in this room, will pay through your taxes to start building their roads, to start building their schools, to start funding their hospitals, to start taking their students to come over to universities like this and be paid for free. But more than that, to be allowing them and their 3.5 million to enter this country if they so wish, freely, without charge, without a visa, to be able to come and challenge for the jobs that we have such difficulty funding our own children with. That is the growth of Europe, and that is the power they have. The power to open up to new countries, to allow more immigration and spend your money on vanity projects that help other countries when the people of this country need their roads made and filled, when they need to ensure that our children have schools, that our hospitals are not filled and that we can see our doctors quite clearly. And that is one reason why I'm out there and having support from people in the UKIP to make sure that we let our people know that we don't want to be there and we don't want to be funding other countries' projects. Because in this country, I sense at the moment there is a sense of despair. There is a sense of fear about the future of themselves and their children, or of their grandchildren. It's what is going to happen to them and their futures. What are we going to see when we see such difficulties? When we know that in our country, for the first time in generations, people are feeding out of food banks, and that ordinary families are concerned about whether they have arguments with their bosses for fear of losing their jobs. What is it if fear when you look at the houses that you've saved up all your lives, or your families have been there for generations, and that you know that you can have your houses taken away from you in old age because they say that we will put you in a home and sell your houses to do it, or that they will have to build on green bank and lovely parts of our countryside because we need to have more houses to fill the numbers of people in this country. There is a fear in our country when we know that at the end of the week or the end of the month when we get our paycheck, not only are we seeing vast amounts of it taken away in tax, but we then have to ask ourselves how we pay for our electricity bills. We ask the question, why are we paying on average £400 a year extra in our gas and electricity bills simply to pay for European Union directives on carbon and reducing carbon in our environment, to pay for wind farms, where the owners of those wind farms get grants of up to £30,000 a year per wind farm for 20 years. Why are we paying for rich to be able to have wind farms that don't work anyway, and we have to rely upon electricity caused by gas or carbon making, nuclear power or gas anyway, to support them when there's no wind? It makes absolutely no sense. Or when our families, as Peter has referred to in terms of our food, have an average food budget of £250 to £400 extra a year because we're paying a third of our £60 million a day that we now pay to the European Union to fund the Common Agricultural Policy. Now, the Common Agricultural Policy, for many of you don't know, is the funding policy made by the European Union to give subsidies to farmers all across Europe. And then you get the anomalies that Pete talks about. I use it as a simple example every now and again when I'm exhausted after a week, and I'm sure many of you do. I like a pint every now and again, but one of them is a gin and tonic. When you get that line, and you have a line, think about that line. If that line is to come from a country where there's people living on $2 to $3 a day in South America or the West Indies, if they're working hard, trying to provide for their families, and they put it together in a box and they want to sell it to the UK, they have to pay an 18% charge, an 18% tariff to the European Union, meaning that line is 18% more. But if you're a Greek farmer, or a Spanish farmer, or an Italian farmer making the same line, not only do you not have to work as hard as them, you actually get a bonus from the European Union in the form of a grant that you pay for in this room. So they sell their product to us for a higher price in your shops, and you're therefore paying twice. Not only are you not able to get the cheaper food from lines, but you're actually paying for the privilege of subsidising farmers in southern Europe to give you higher food prices. Does that make sense to you? Because it certainly doesn't make sense to me. And that is one other reason why UKIP believes we should be out of the European Union, because we can support farmers like Pete, subsidise them in the way that's necessary, ensure that our products of our food prices are cheaper, and therefore ensure that the people of this country have the money that's here in this country, paying for the people of this country and feeding the people of this country. But I sense also that despite all the despair, and despite the concerns of our family, that there is hope. And this is something that I feel particularly proud about. I feel hope by the very nature that I'm seeing over 50 or 60 people in this room tonight. Because when I joined UKIP 4 years ago, and I decided, well, pretty much on my wife's pushing, to stop throwing things at the television and get off of my backside, although that was probably the nicest thing she was saying to me at the time, and do something about it if you believe it. I used to come to rooms with only 3 or 4 or 5 people. And then the rooms filled up to 10 and 15 and 20 people. And now I'm going to rooms like this all across the country. In the last 3 weeks ago, I've done 2,500 miles from Harrogate to campaigning in Rochester. And all over the country there are people who are feeling this. And they're seeing and listening to a different message, a message that's not like other political parties. And it's this, I think, that is something indomitable about the people and the spirit of Britain. And I'm going to try and sort of, I did actually have a page here. And it's a poem by Rudyard Kipling.